What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to continue with the monitor swap saga. And the cabinet that goes under the knife this week is going to be the new Namco Legacy cabinet, the Pac-Mania version of that Namco Legacy cabinet. And hey, if you want to stay up to date on all the new projects and all the new cabinets getting new monitors swapped into them, why don't you go ahead and smash that subscribe button down below. It really helps out the channel, and I really do appreciate it. Now let's get to this particular video. Is this going to be as easy as the Mortal Kombat 30th? I hope it's going to be a little bit easier, but are the results going to be as rewarding as that Mortal Kombat 30th cabinet? Well, yes and no. Let me know. I'm not going to spoil the video. Let's go ahead and get into it. So just like that Mortal Kombat cabinet, we're going to go with the Dell E1715S, and this is not a new monitor because, well, you guys bought them all. So this is a open box item. It's going to come with all the other accessories, but you know the thing that we're really after is that LCD panel. And because this is an open box item, I want to go ahead and make sure that it works before I bother decasing the monitor itself. And it looks like the seller was not being deceitful. We got a fully functional unit, so we're going to be good to go. And now that I've got my towel down to protect the monitor, we're going to go and begin the decasing process. It's pretty simple. Start by removing the 6 screws on the back of the monitor, and then pick one of the 4 corners and start with an actual guitar pick to create a little bit of a gap, then use a wider plastic tool to go around the entire monitor. The corner opposite of the power switch was the first one to go, and then once you get that, the other 4 corners will follow suit. Remember to open this thing up like a book so that you don't rip that cable and potentially damage the monitor itself. Now, we're not going to be using this board, so if you do rip that cable, it's not going to be the end of the world, but there's no reason to completely destroy it and run the risk of scratching that monitor. Now we're going to go ahead and unplug this cable with the back portion of the monitor completely out of the way. And once you get that removed, go ahead and unplug the LED backlight cable down here. Remove the tape. Be very careful when you remove this cable. You don't want to damage that socket. And then the rest of the back portion is just held on with some tape. Go ahead and remove the LVDS cable by depressing the tabs on either side. And then once you're done with that, you can lift the entire assembly out of the way. Now I'm going to go ahead and set this aside and go over to the Pac-Mania cabinet and begin the disassembly, starting with the control panel, the 4 screws. Lift up and the whole assembly comes out. Unplug your 2 cables on the bottom side. And now it's time to focus on removing the bezel, the actual plexi that covers up the monitor. And this is way easier than the Mortal Kombat 30th because you're going to have access to all the screws, the 4 on the bottom, the 2 in the middle, and the 4 up top. You don't have to disassemble the cabinet at all. That's really, really good because that was the biggest problem and the biggest pain with that Mortal Kombat cabinet. Okay, so we're almost done. We're down to the last 4 screws that hold the monitor into the actual wood itself. But before we take out those last few screws, let's go ahead and unplug everything from the back of the PCB. With that done, take out the final screw and then press from the back and keep your hand up front so you catch this thing so it doesn't fall forward. We're not going to reuse this monitor, but there's no sense in breaking it. And now let's head back to the workbench to go ahead and decase this LCD panel, and I'm going to start by removing all the screws that secure the PCB to the back of the metal housing. But before I remove it completely, I'm going to go ahead and mark this corner just so that I can keep my orientation correct. Before I remove the LVDS cable, I want to make sure that I mark where the red wire is located so that when I plug this back in, that orientation is correct. If you don't do that, you could damage the PCB. So with the PCB out of the way, now it's time to remove the 4 screws that hold the LCD panel inside the housing, and yes, this is going to void the warranty. So that last screw, once that's gone, you're beyond the point of no return. Go ahead and feed those cables through the jacketing. And I also wanted to make another mark just to keep everything correct because, you know, it's easy to get turned around when you take everything apart and put it back together. You're going to unplug the backlight and the LVDS cable on this monitor, just like you did on the panel that was in the Dell monitor. And when you compare this monitor to the one I removed from the MK30th cabinet, you'll see that it's basically the same monitor, just with a different build date. Okay, this heart transplant is almost done. Let's go ahead and grab that good LCD panel we took out of the Dell monitor, and then we're going to reattach the stock Arcade1Up cables in the same way that we removed them from the stock Arcade1Up LCD panel. To keep all the cables secure, I'm going to go ahead and reapply tape in all the areas that I removed during the disassembly process. Now, I know you're excited because you're almost at the end, but don't rush this process. Take your time, make sure that everything is connected properly, tighten up all the screws, and then go ahead and add a little bit of tape just to keep everything secure. So the stock RK1UP LCD panel had a black bezel, but this one is silver. So to make sure that that doesn't show up when we put our plexi back on, I'm going to go ahead and cover this with some black tape. To make sure that there's no particles trapped between the plexiglass and the monitor, I like to use a Swiffer duster on both surfaces before I tighten up the screws. And so after you reconnect all the cables to the PCB and control panel, go ahead and secure the control panel with the 4 screws, hit the power switch, and see what you got. And at first glance, this LCD panel looks really good until you make the mistake of leaning to your left a little bit beyond the second player position, and you'll notice a little bit of discoloration. Now this is a one-player game, so it shouldn't be that big of a deal, but remember, the purpose of this swap was to get the perfect monitor. And with all the lights off, it's a little bit easier to see. It really is just in the one direction. Top, bottom, and then right really doesn't have an issue. It's not really the backlight. It's almost like a polarizing film that's creating some of that discoloration. It's not as bad as it appears on camera, at least on this main menu screen. Most of the Pac-Man games, it's really not an issue at all. But where I really noticed this was when I was playing Rolling Thunder. It really does a dramatic discoloring when you view it from an extreme left-hand angle. Now, overall brightness and clarity is definitely improved, and if you look at this straight on, it's a great improvement, but wow, that's just really weird. And it may be the orientation, it may be the fact that this is traditionally a horizontal, and now we've taken it vertical. So this would basically be the same effect if you were looking at the MK monitor from the top down, but that's just something I don't really notice when I'm playing that cabinet. So this is definitely a huge improvement, but it's not perfect. Alright, so there you have it, and if you're on the fence about whether to do the swap, I don't know that I've helped you. I really think that for the most part for me, it is definitely beneficial to go ahead and make this swap, but the results aren't quite as cut and dry. It's not quite as black and white as it was with the MK30th cabinet, so you got to make the call. But I think that now I'm faced with another difficult question. I have this monitor just laying around. I have a couple of these now, these original monitors that weren't quite up to the task. And what do? Do I just throw them away? And this is sort of a point in RK1UP history where they made a mistake and they've redeemed themselves with the new Capcom legacies, but I feel like these should be honored in some way. So no, I'm not going to throw these in the trash. I think they need to be put out to pasture. Well, what I meant to say was, put it out of its misery.